I want to make a point about what makes a philosophy real. For a real philosophy to be real, requires that you could live that philosophy. Otherwise, the philosophy is just an exercise in in uh, intellectual pleasures. You know, some people do philosophy, and they should live more philosophically. They do philosophy, they work on these worldviews, and the worldviews are ways of living. They're ways of interacting with the world, but they don't necessarily live them. They just tinker with them. And those are not real philosophies. Skepticism and relativism are both subject to accusations, for example, that they aren't real philosophies. For example, skepticism, there's an old canard about skepticism that if you put a skeptic who was starving, equidistant between two plates of food, he'd starve to death, not knowing which to take, which is funny. If that was true, then skepticism would be the kind of philosophy you couldn't actually live and practice, and that would in fact prove it was an invalid philosophy if you can't live by it. In my view. And that's sort of a materialistic requirement, that there has to be a material point to the philosophy, basically. Uh, the thing is, it isn't true. It's a funny thing that people that believe in objective certainty are just projecting on the skeptics this dilemma. It's really the people that have to be certain before they act that would be stuck in this situation because there's no way to decide, right? The skeptic doesn't ever think there's a way to decide and be right, make the best decision. Even if they are in equidistance, even if one's closer, the skeptic doesn't think there's a way to make an objectively correct decision in that situation. So, they are more inclined to just choose at random in that case because they just need to eat. So, so that fails to be an accusation of skepticism, but it would if it was true. And the same thing with moral relativism, by the way. The whole moral relativism idea where no moralities count. Your morality doesn't count any more than somebody else's because they're all relative. That's not really what relativism says, as I've pointed out. Relativism says that you can't find out what something is in itself. You can't say it is good or is bad in itself, but you can compare it to other philosophies. When you have a philosophy that you'd like to say, well, it just is bad, like Nazism, that's because it compares poorly to every other philosophy. Okay. You can compare things in relativism, but if that interpretation was true, that would invalidate moral relativism because it's not possible to care about other people's morals more than your own. If you think you're doing that, then you'd really be caring about your own philosophy, which was telling you to do what someone else said they believed was correct. And that would be your philosophy that you'd be living by. You can't actually value somebody else's morality the way you value your own, because you just can't. To do that, you'd have to have your own morality that said to do that, so it'd still be your morality that you're serving. So both of these are philosophies that can be lived, and in a way, this is what leads me to them, because I look at the limitations on our knowledge, and I see that we're living anyway. So I know something works out because we're working it out. But if a philosophy can't be lived, it's not a real philosophy.